Hello! In this video, we will see how to write consent forms consistent with ethical practices. The Informed Consent Form, ICF, is perhaps the most critical document for researchers and biobanks to establish when collecting human samples and data for research. In this video, we focus mainly on the ICF in the context of biobanking, which is one tool to establish the ethical and lawful basis for collecting, analyzing, and using a person's samples and data. The principles of informed consent have been described and discussed in the video on informed consent. Here, we will discuss how to operationalize those principles and develop an informed consent form. These two video presentations should be seen in conjunction with each other. The informed consent form consists of two parts. The information sheet provides all the relevant details about the collection and storage of samples. The brief consent document acknowledges that all the information has been received, understood, and agreed upon, and is signed. The content of the information sheet should include all of these elements where applicable. Where relevant, explain that the information sheet provides information only on collection for future use and will not contribute in any way to learn more about their disease in the immediate future nor to manage their disease condition. Explain that the collection is for storage in a biobank for future research purpose. Give information about the biobank and its oversight structures, such as the Sample Access Committee and the Ethics and Scientific Advisory Committee, as relevant. Describe voluntary participation and right to withdraw. That participation is voluntary and the donor can at any time withdraw his samples from the collection, without penalty of any sort. Emphasize uncertainty, but explain broadly what the samples and data will be used for. Explain the safeguards to respect the wishes of the donors that have been put in place by the biobank. Often the exact research is unknown at the time of collection, and so the broadest reasonable scope should be described. As an extension of the research purpose, an explanation of the types of analysis foreseen should be given. Sequencing is a form of analysis which IRB often require to be agreed to by the donor in a standalone question. Other important analyses to be flagged up are sexually transmitted diseases. Establishing cell lines is also a use which must be specifically listed if foreseen. Again, it is better to have as broad a consent as possible. Commercial use. It is essential for biobanks to include the provision that samples and data can be used for commercial and non-commercial purposes, and that the donor will not receive any reward in the case that the research leads to profitable business. This does not preclude providing information on benefit sharing if planned. Describe the collection procedures, an explanation of the usually simple collection methods to be used for the different sample types. Enumerate the benefits to the donor. These are normally limited to contributing to research into the condition from which they may suffer and contributing more generally to science. Enumerate the risks, usually minor for collection projects, but these must be listed. Mention contact information. Who to contact with questions, usually the principal investigator, PI, and how. Phone number, PI's office, etc. Mention the time investment, the amount of time required of the donor. Describe confidentiality procedures, how samples and data will be stored and where. Usually, reference will be made to applicable data protection laws and where the data will be processed. Reference must be made to the measures taken to code, de-identify, pseudonymize the samples and data, or in certain cases, to anonymize them. Allude to incidental findings. Reference should be made to how the research team will act, if at all, on a chance discovery relevant to the donor's health. The donor must indicate whether he wishes to be informed in such a case. A common formulation is that the PI will be informed by the researcher and the PI will decide whether to inform the donor, based on the quality of the data, whether it is actionable, and the health significance. Provide information on reimbursement. Any reimbursement for expenses must be set out. The consent certificate is a relatively straightforward subpart of the ICF, certifying that the information sheet has been read by and/or explained to the donor. The information has been understood, questions have been satisfactorily answered, and that the donor agrees to the collection of samples and data. It is signed by the donor, or temp-printed in the case of an illiterate donor, and must be countersigned by the qualified staff member who explained the form and the study, and who witnessed the donor's signature. Local norms and customs must be taken into account when drafting an ICF. Example: the IRB might refuse broad consent or may have well-established opinions on which issues must be the subject of separate questions. Other IRB may require multiple-choice questions. Agreement to sequencing is typically the subject of a separate question. These are usually a question of form, not principle, but not always. Refusal of broad consent is a case in point. Often, the best way to progress rapidly is to consult prior IRB-approved ICF. The principles and content of successful ICF for collections are well established. For biobanking collections, without doubt, broad consent, information about the governance structures of the biobank, specific agreement to sequencing, and agreement for commercial research are key issues which must be included in the information sheet in order to strengthen trust and generate confidence in the work of the biobank.